Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagan, and we are back here in Studio 130 for another fun-filled, action-packed episode of the Gold Standard and Iowa Conservative podcast. Once again, it is John Hendrickson and myself, ready to thrill and excite you. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Great. This is exactly what I want to hear. So we sort of teased out last time we were together that we're going to have a new feature. We always say we're going to have new features, and then we never actually live up to the bit.
Yeah.
And so but we keep saying we've got a new feature. So we have a new feature today, which, are you excited?
I am, yeah.
Okay. The new feature is topics that I didn't tell John we were going to cover and just let him go.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the first question in all this, John, did you watch the Tucker Carlson interview with Vladimir Putin?
I did not. No.
You have?
No, I was going to, but then I heard it was 2 hours long.
It is 2 hours long.
And I was working on an article draft last night, so
this is just I don't even know. You've blown the entire episode now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right, then I'll just jump in here.
I did read about it.
Okay, good. Because I started watching it, and literally the first 45 minutes, I didn't even get through the Vladimir Putin history lesson that he gave to Tucker on the history of Russia, Ukraine, and conflict and borders in Eastern Europe.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually kind of interesting. I mean, when you're listening to, Vladimir Putin lecture you about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Now, and I don't know, Tucker kind of said at the beginning, he's like, I think he was kind of filibustering, but maybe he wasn't. And look, as we've talked, I think from the Russian standpoint, their history and their background matters. Their perspective on what they see as Western aggression.
Yes, yeah.
That matters. I don't think it excuses the Russians and Vladimir Putin from truly being the aggressors in this conflict. Make no mistake.
Not, yeah.
But it is at a minimum, how they've sold it to their people.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. The criticism of the whole thing has been, what in the world is Tucker Carlson doing interviewing Putin at all? And he's clearly just a Putin, apologist and everything. Putin was kind of taking shots at him.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw this, but made some comment about Tucker had wanted to join the CIA at some point. I mean, it was really it wasn't just a purely favorable interview.
Yeah.
And so I think that for those on the left that were just apoplectic over Tucker even going to Moscow to do this interview, I'm sure they'd be fine if it was Anderson Cooper.
Yeah.
But because it's Tucker Carlson, they didn't like it. It's not like this was some friendly thing either. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to listen to the rest of it.
Yeah,
if nothing else was fascinating, just to listen to Vladimir Putin unedited in his own words.
Yes. Yeah, that's on my to-do list this weekend.
Okay. Good.
Because I really am looking forward to that. And I was thinking last night, and we can go back in our history and see other examples of controversial leaders being interviewed, like Castro or even Khrushchev, or even Hitler.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm going to hold you to that. On our next episode, I'm sure that you'll do this on Sunday evening, because that's your time slot for this. If the Chiefs win, we'll be talking about the Super Bowl. If the Chiefs lose, we're going to be talking about Vladimir Putin.
Okay.
So that's sort of.
I'll take notes.
Okay, good. All right. So. Next issue, John, that I didn't prep you for.
I'm not doing good right now.
No, you're not. You're failing. You're
yes,
just completely failing.
Yeah.
This is all on me today. Anthony Fauci gave a talk, I believe, at Georgetown University on the lessons he learned from COVID. Among them, and I'm paraphrasing based off what I saw on Twitter, because that's where I get all my news.
Yeah.
That we should have reacted to COVID harder and faster. That COVID probably came from an animal. We should mandate all boosters, and science is under attack.
Wow.
Are those the lessons you took away from COVID?
Absolutely not. And it sounds like he's digging in.
Yeah. If anything else, what I learned from COVID is that we collectively as a world overreacted to it.
Yes.
Not to minimize what people have suffered from, but we're going to be facing that for generations.
Absolutely.
And that I think anybody that's willing to just plainly look at the facts, realize that this is a man-made problem.
Yeah.
I think anybody that's willing to just look at the facts realizes that these vaccines have real problems and they aren't for everyone. at a minimum. And if science is under attack, you probably ought to look in the mirror.
It's interesting how the left, I've seen a pattern. The two words they use constantly are democracy and science to justify their extreme positions.
That's right.
You know, so if you disagree with them, you're a threat to democracy and you're denying science.
I would submit that they're the ones that are opposed. The thing that's dangerous is to open an honest dialogue.
Yes, absolutely.
And the very nature of science is asking questions.
Yeah.
And yet they want to shut that off. Mm-hmm. It's dangerous stuff.
It is, yeah. I saw an editorial, I forget what paper it was this week, that basically said that if you believe there's only two genders, then you're denying science.
Yeah.
I mean, just complete nonsense.
You're denying thousands of years of human evolution. But, hey, whatever. Okay, next issue, John, because this is a little bit of an update for us. So this is one that I think you're up to speed on, and so this. But we've talked at least a little bit in the last couple episodes about immigration and the border and the bill that's running through Congress. So we were both fairly upset that in typical Washington, D.C. style, they were attempting to slip Ukraine money into the immigration bill.
Yeah.
Well, since that didn't work, they decided to just come on straight on up with it and do Ukraine funding as a standalone. You and I both had some thoughts earlier about that. I've talked to people that are very frustrated with Republicans specifically in the U.S. Senate voting for $61 billion for Ukraine, $14 billion for Israel, and another almost $5 billion for Taiwan. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, is that fair?
I would say, I mean, it is fair in the sense for those frustrated and disappointed with those 14, however many Republican senators voted for that. But I think there's a lot of serious concerns about just continually throwing money at Ukraine. One is it's been proven that there's no accountability, and also we are basically promoting a war that Ukraine's losing, but also we're basically encouraging escalation of it instead of trying to find a diplomatic resolution to this. So I think it's I would agree. I'm very frustrated by it.
Yeah.
And you know what? It shows that there's some people in Washington that care more about other borders than our own, and I think that's awful.
Yeah. Well, I know it just seems like there's growing frustration with that general idea is that we are ignoring domestic issues, whether it's the border or even where we spend these dollars or whether we spend them at all, because we're so focused on what's happening in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's spilling out into other parts of culture.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's part of it is people losing faith in the system and institutions.
Yes. Yeah. And it's frustrating because listening to the media basically say, well, border security was defeated. And as you and I talked about in the last episode, this bill had nothing to do with border security. In fact, it did the direct opposite. And that's frustrating to see that level of spin. And I think the American people aren't buying it.
Yeah. There was a clip that was Stephen A. Smith, who's a ESPN host, just going off on this money. And that's not the kind of thing I don't know if he's necessarily coming up from a conservative standpoint, but frustrated. It's like, really, this is the best use of this.
Yeah.
And it's either going overseas or people that haven't, I think his perspective is we have people with real needs here in our own country.
Absolutely.
And it's just, it's almost like there's an awakening starting to this.
Yeah.
And that's where I think some of this is where I come back to, we've talked about this, John, that this isn't something that is because Donald Trump or the America First movement suddenly came out of nowhere. These issues were underlying in our society, and there's somebody came along and gave voice to that.
That's right.
And maybe even amplified it. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But the American people have real questions about where their money is going.
That's right. Yeah.
And that operates independently of Republican or Democrat or Trump or Biden or anything. So anyway, Well, good. I think we spent plenty of time on that. Here in Iowa, it's been a weird legislative session, John.
I was going to actually ask you that question because it seems like it, and I wanted to get your perspective on that because I think you're right.
Well, I don't know if we've mentioned this on the show, John. Yeah, every legislative session is different. They're all unique. Every General Assembly is unique. If for no other reason, there's different people involved. They have their own ebb and flow. And I think part of this is that for most of the last several years, let's just say of the years of the Republican trifecta of control, there's usually been a really big or set of big conservative reforms that sort of just chew up all the attention. And yes, the tax bill this year is a good conservative reform, but I don't know that there's that one overarching thematic bill that does that. And so there's been a lot of little bills that you've seen talked about. I think the AEA bill, the reform bill, chief among them. But and then that bill has really taken a back seat. I think the parts of that bill are still alive and viable, but both the House and the Senate have really tapped the brakes on that. And so almost like the funnel week is coming up, one more week left, and yet there just isn't that kind of activity around the building that there usually is. It's an election year, so I don't know if it's necessarily a weird year, but it is quieter than I think we've seen in years past.
Yeah, I think you're right because, last 2 years we saw, last year was the Students First Act, the ESAs, and then the following year was the flat tax bill, and those were two major ones, and then there was other reforms in previous years too.
Yeah. There's still going to be some very good things come out of this session, and frankly, and I know I've said this before, there reaches a point where it's okay for our legislature to not do very much.
Yes, yeah.
At some point, as conservatives, we don't want the government to act.
That's right, yeah.
Now, I think there's always things they can do, but, hey, there isn't a big bill that we need to work on this year. That is okay, right? We share that belief.
Yeah.
Okay, so good.
Yeah.
So nothing's wrong, nothing's broken. It's just less on the agenda this year than some other years, and that's fine.
And, the article I was working on last night was sort of a kind of a summary of this point.
Now, before you go any further, this is the article that you were working on instead of listening to Tucker Carlson interview Vladimir Putin. So this better be good.
See the sacrifice I made?
This better be good stuff. All right, that's all.
But just kind of doing just a brief survey of some of the major things, there is still a lot of good stuff on the plate. And it's just not, and maybe I'm not describing this right, but it's just not it's not huge like the ESA or the flat tax. The tax bills obviously are big, but there's some other smaller reforms that are important, but they're not getting the attention.
Not necessarily going to be talked about in the Wall Street Journal,
in
the national media, or celebrated at national policy conference. They're very good. They will make the state more competitive or greater opportunities. They just might not garner the same amount of attention. But go ahead.
Yeah. And a lot of those are regulatory reform measures that we talked about, and obviously both tax bills. You have the governor's tax bill and the joint House Senate tax bill. Also the proposed constitutional amendments that would provide protections for taxpayers. Those are all really good ideas that are out there, and so there is some good things moving in the legislature right now.
Yeah. You had one bill that you mentioned. I can't remember exactly what it did.
Yes,
but, the one that you wanted that we had not talked about at all before.
No.
That you got piqued your interest.
Yes, I actually found this out watching our favorite local news network, Channel 8.
Good.
And this is a House Bill 2330, and basically what it does is it restores and strengthens the social studies curriculum in Iowa for K through 12, and specifically it would make reforms to improve how American history, American government, and Western civilization is taught. In fact, one area of improvement, which I think is really good, is right now part of Iowa's curriculum is world history. It would replace that with Western civilization.
Love it.
Which I think is good. And then also it would emphasize primary documents. So, for example, the Gettysburg Address, the Constitution, and it would basically focus on, and I'll just quote it here, it would center instruction around the history of America's ideals and institutions of liberty and Republican self-government. It would also outlaw what we call action civics, which is basically a weapon that liberal activists use to pretend they're teaching social studies, but it's actually indoctrinating students to become liberal activists for various causes. And so, not going into details of this bill, but it does a lot of good things of basically what I think is going back to how history should be taught and not politicizing it and sort of getting away from some of this radical curriculums that we've seen kind of move their way into the public school system.
I like that a lot too, and our listeners may not all know that you are a student of history. You're a teacher of history,
yes,
and this is sort of your own passion. And so this, John knows what he's talking about here, folks.
Because I've seen firsthand the level of civic ignorance.
Yes,
I've had students in a freshman undergraduate American government class that cannot identify the three branches of government.
Yeah.
And so I've seen a lot of things that are disturbing.
Well, we had that conversation at my house last night
Yeah.
with my daughter in 5th grade who had a friend over, and they were quizzing each other because they're doing this in school right now, and making sure that they knew what the three branches of government were.
That's neat.
Yeah. And I sent her to school with one of my the pins that the governor used to sign bills with.
Yeah.
I said, you can take this, but I want it back.
Yeah,
she has actually signed a law with this pin. So
that's neat.
So she was just thrilled with that.
Yeah.
So she's a big Kim Reynolds fan.
Yeah.
No, I think that's good. And you told me that was Speaker Grassley that actually was the lead sponsor.
Yes, Speaker
on that, correct?
Grassley, yep, and our good friend, Representative Gustav, is a co-sponsor, and there's several others as well.
No, I think that's good stuff. And the House really has, on some of these kinds of issues, really has shown a lot of leadership with curriculum, what's happening in our schools. And so I know that the folks at Channel 8 aren't always as thrilled with some of those ideas, but I for one, appreciate their leadership.
I do too.
On these kinds of issues. So, well, good. Well, hopefully some of these things move forward. We'll have more of a report. It'll probably be a week and a half of sort of a digesting what's still alive after the legislative funnel. But I guess I have a couple of announcements, I guess, before the end of it. And I told you about this earlier. Next week, John, we're going to have the next ITR Foundation poll.
I'm excited for that.
We got some good questions in it this
absolutely.
time.
Yeah.
And so we put some thought into it, trying to get a couple of new issue questions, but we're going to test some tax issues. We're going to test some of these federal foreign affairs issues that we've talked about on the show a lot lately. Because I want to know where Iowans are at on it.
Absolutely.
We had a Ukraine question about a year ago, and it was more split than I thought. So I stand ready to be surprised or validated on whichever way it is, John. And we try really hard to make sure that those questions are fairly worded. I mean, you saw me going round and round on
multiple
one of these
drafts.
Just to make sure that we're not asking. It's really easy in a poll to ask that leading question that gets you the result you want. I want to know what Iowans think. So
these aren't push questions.
No, not at all. And we have a very reputable pollster that is highly rated even by places like 538.com. And so we think it's part of our mission to have this kind of data out there. So anyway, that's coming up. Hopefully we will have something for release later next week. And we usually try and do sort of a special podcast episode of that. Yeah. So that's something for folks to look forward to. So we're both.
I think so. And I want folks to realize too that, this poll is serious. I mean, it's done by a professional firm, and it's this sample is good. And so I hope as we continue to do these polls, it gets more attention because, as you've pointed out, we've been fairly accurate.
Well, yes. I mean, we can go back and spike the football again on how we did in leading up to the 2022 election.
Yes.
We're the ones that called this.
That's right.
And so the gold standard is back, right, John?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. Another thing is we're going to be making, hopefully fairly soon, an announcement of when we'll be holding the ITR NFIP tax day luncheon. So we're going to be able to talk about that. So there's just a lot of, I think, exciting things that are coming up soon. We're a broken record on this. It's a great time to be in Iowa. It's a great time to be a fiscal conservative in Iowa.
Absolutely.
And it's a really great time to be working for a fiscal policy think tank in Iowa. But we say that because we want people to kind of come on alongside us and join in the fight. And there's still plenty of good seats available.
Absolutely.
So with that is my segue into, making sure that you're sharing our content with your friends, making sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube.
I did, by the way.
You did.
Yes,
I checked.
yes.
I did check, John. He is now officially a subscriber of the ITR Live podcast on our YouTube page. Give us a good review and just continue to be active in the fight for a better Iowa.
That's right.
Okay. Well, thanks, John. Appreciate it. And with all of that having been said, we will see you next time on ITR Live.